Hello and welcome back to GCSE History lessons. In this lesson, we'll look at two of the main ideologies of the USSR. The USSR was the USA's main rival throughout the Cold War. It was communist, not capitalist, and it was a one-party state instead of a democracy. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to define communism and the one-party state, and be able to identify the strengths and weaknesses of these two systems. You should also know a bit about the history of communism. Last video we looked at the ideas of capitalism and democracy, which were the major ideas of the USA and its allies during the Cold War. We learned that capitalism is an economic system where individuals run the economy by setting up businesses or working for businesses as employees, allowing them to buy and sell goods and services without interference from the state. We also learned that democracy is a political system where people choose their government in frequent elections. As with Lesson 1, we will start with our definitions. Communism is an economic system in which all property is owned by the community, and each person contributes work and receives goods according to their ability and needs. The word communism comes from the word community. So, a communist country is a country where the community shares all its wealth and resources. It's worth noting that while in theory communist countries are run by the workers, in reality the government controls the economy. The communist state-controlled economy is sometimes called the command economy, because the government can command its people and factories to do whatever it likes. It's also important to understand why communism came to be a major ideology in the 20th century. Communism became popular in Europe during the late Industrial Revolution, where the poor conditions of the workers and the difference in wealth between them and the landowners created unrest. A German philosopher named Karl Marx noticed this and predicted that the working class, which he called the proletariat, would rise up against the wealthy landowners and aristocracy, the bourgeoisie, to establish a communist state where everyone would be equal in wealth and ownership. Marx believed that all of history was a struggle between different classes in society, and eventually every society would evolve into a communist one. Communism finally moved from theory to reality when the hardships of World War I combined with weak leadership led to a communist revolution in Russia during October 1917. This was the birth of the USSR, the world's first communist country. The symbol of communism is the hammer and sickle, to represent the industrial and rural workers, or the proletariat. It was adopted by the USSR. Now, returning to the definitions. A one-party state is a political system where people can vote for their leader, but only one political party is permitted. During the Cold War, the USSR was a one-party state, but it often verged on dictatorship, where citizens had no choice in how the country was governed at all. Now let's look at the costs and benefits of each of these ideas. Communism's strengths are that it can help to spread wealth more evenly throughout society, and it ensures the economy and population is within the control of the government. However, communism relies on nationalism to motivate people, since jobs are given and there is no competition between businesses. Poor governmental management can also lead to disaster, when the government controls the entire economy, and people have less freedom over where their money is spent. Within the one-party system, the government has greater control over people and the ideology of the country, which allows the country to be more consistent over time in its dealings with domestic and international concerns. The government can also plan further into the future, since there is no threat to the ruling party at elections, while people are still able to vote for their preferred politician. On the other hand, since governments of one-party states cannot be voted out, they are often less concerned with civil rights. There is also no opposition to keep the government in check or to question the ideology of the party, and there is no chance to change the ideologies by voting. Finally, the one-party system is more vulnerable to corruption and abuses of power. So, to summarise what we have learned today, communism and the one-party state were the main ideas of the East, especially the USSR, during the Cold War. Communism and the one-party system are political and economic ideologies which focus on the ability of the state to control society and distribute wealth equally. They usually maintain control by restricting individual freedoms. Communism became a popular idea during the Industrial Revolution and World War I because of the poor conditions of the workers. The Russian Revolution resulted in the USSR becoming the first communist country. Both communism and the one-party system have strengths and weaknesses. Generally, they are strong because they allow the government to control the state and direct resources to achieve national goals. But to achieve this, they sacrifice the rights and freedoms of individuals. If you watched both lessons 1 and 2, you should now be able to compare the ideologies of the USA and USSR. Both of these superpowers believed their idea was the best, and it's important for us to recognise that for many leaders and people around the world during the Cold War, choosing between the two was a tough decision. Next lesson, we will look at two final ideas of the Cold War: decolonisation and socialism. Thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time on GCSE History Lessons.